First, I want to thank the organizers, the program members of Friends of Pakatan Rakyat for organizing this event and for inviting me to address you this afternoon. I met some of you yesterday, some for the first time, most of you. And of course I know Shamsul Fulan very well, and one or two others, but it was the first meeting, and I must say that very impressed with your commitment, with your sincerity, and with your preparedness to sacrifice for the betterment of the country. I thank you very much. You know, before I left for London, I was asked by someone in the press, somewhat cynically, what do you expect from people who live in London? What do you expect them to do for Pakatan Rakyat? And obviously, this person obviously ignorant of history. Because, as you can remember, in 1977, when Zia-ul-Haq, the dictator in Pakistan, when he imprisoned Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the first lawfully elected Prime Minister of Pakistan, when he sent Bhutto to jail, when he was ready to destroy Bhutto, there was nothing they could do in Pakistan except to congregate in London, to set up this Save the Bhutto Committee. Of course, headed by his own son, Murtaza, and Pakistanis living in London. And the momentum, the movement gained strength. They managed to get support from all over the world. Of course, they failed to save Zulfikar from the gallows. But because of that movement, it started in London in 1977. The movement for the restoration of democracy helped to sustain and to rebuild democracy in Pakistan. For whatever that we've got in Pakistan today was because of that movement that started in London. So you see, there are many things you can do from here. I'm very pleased to hearing this statement from the chairman of the committee, Brian, about his enthusiasm, about his willingness to do everything possible for our country. And I am sure Malaysians in London and elsewhere, you have tremendous contribution to make. Because there comes a time in the life of a nation when they ask of you as citizens to sacrifice, to stand up for something. And this is the time. The Americans did it 200 years ago to save the Union, to defend the emancipation of mankind, to abolish slavery. They did that. Thousands and thousands of Americans gave their life for that cause. And as recently as the Second World War, the same thing happened. People in Europe got together and they managed to overcome racism and all that's evil with Nazism and Hitler. You know, in Asia too, we had to struggle. If you look at the history of our Asian countries, it's the same pattern. Nothing comes easy. For democracy, for dignity, for the rights of the people, you have to pay a price for that. The Philippines did that for many years. Aquino started it. He exiled himself in America. Of course, he was killed on his return. But the seeds were planted there for the people's movement. And today, another Aquino is president of Philippines. The Indonesians did the same. The students gave their life for democracy. and they got it. The people in Aceh fought for their freedom, they got it. The Indians too. In our country, we got our independence, somewhat quite easily. It was a negotiated settlement. And we had the opportunity then. We were a sovereign democracy. We were founded, and the proclamation of independence made it clear. It was to be a country founded on principles of justice, of liberty, of freedom for the people, of equality. I still remember all this pronouncement by Datuk at Stadium Merdeka. That was the country we wanted to build for the nation. And even in 1963, when we formed Malaysia, it was not the same spirit. The spirit that governance must be based on consent and not force. On the basis that we are all subject to abuse if we have too much power, so there must be checks and balances. Those were the principles of which our nation was founded. And unfortunately, today we have come to a state somewhat similar to Pakistan in 1977. The difference only being that Zia-ul Haq took over power as a military coup. And we got power, the Barisan got power today by election. A distorted, unfair election, but they got it by way of election, but it's nevertheless a dictatorship. I will explain. You see, for many years, we've got a situation in the country where we didn't have this idea of a supremacist ideology in the country. For many years, we were all Malaysians. I belong to the old generation, of course. And I don't recall, and many of my friends of that time, we were all Malaysians. You are Indian, Chinese, Bengali, whatever. No one talks about this race and that race. We wanted to be one nation. But that experiment failed. Especially when Mahathir took over power. Today, what do you have? You have ministers and leaders who extol the virtues of superiority. You cannot question this. You cannot question that if you belong to a certain race. If you are an Umno Malay, you can say anything you like. You will never be subject to the law of sedition. But if you are a non-Malay, or if you are a Malay like me, we will be subject to that. 15 leaders of opposition have been harassed, some of them charged for sedition, for just questioning very basic issues of the country. But if you are an Umno Malay, you can say anything. You can say you are a prostitute. You can say you are pendatang. You can say whatever you like. You are immune from prosecution. You have one set of laws for one and another set for the others. That is Malaysia today. Before, during election time, you would never find a situation where the Prime Minister would go around buying votes openly, blatantly. Today, you vote for me, I'll give you a few $1 million. No shame. No regard for any law that we have in the country. Because they are immune from prosecution. Something's wrong with our country in this level. Something's really wrong. When a cartoonist like Zuna has been declared a national security threat, his cartoon book is banned. Because it might incite rebellion. Just cartoon. They're in a state of panic, these people. They see enemies everywhere. We have in our country today established principles of the constitution of our government that has been destroyed. And at one time, we used to respect this so-called for the separation of powers. You know, speakers of the assembly have certain powers, especially to whether there's a vacancy in a particular seat. But Peraz's case have shown that also has been thrown overboard. They decide when there's a vacancy, when we can have a by-election. Before, we would have a fair, reasonable formula how constituencies should be demarcated. What proportion between urban and rural? There's a sense of a formula. Now there is none.